The world of D&D is filled with many powerful gods. Now these gods can vary based upon the campaign setting that you're in, but one common thing is that they all have followers and believers that believe in them, and some of those followers are even given divine blessings and divine magic. Now, these special gifts can find themselves on a fiery preacher, or maybe a strong silent type, or maybe someone that's just kind of depressed and doesn't really understand the complexities of the multiverse, and they just kind of feel like they're caught up in the middle of something that's just much bigger than them. Whatever the reason is, these divine agents find themselves with tremendous power, even over the forces of life and death itself. Hello there, everyone. I'm Jake from JNJtabletop, and today we're talking about the Cleric. Now, if we're looking to find examples of clerics in like pop culture or modern media, it's really not that difficult. One of my favorites is actually Thor from Marvel Comics. Now, I know technically he's the god of thunder, but everything else about him kind of just screams a Tempest domain cleric, which we'll get into a little bit later. But he's the kind of guy that has this just amazing hammer, and he's got the power of lightning and thunder at his command. He really does strike me as a cleric. Another good example of a cleric comes from the Bible. The character Moses, when he led the Israelites out of Egypt, was used to do a lot of miracles. Now, the term biblical plague is kind of found because of the things that Moses had done. And when their back was against the wall, he parted the Red Sea, and miracle after miracle just kind of seemed to follow this guy. I could easily look at him as a cleric. Perhaps my favorite example of a cleric would actually be Thoros of Myr in the Game of Thrones setting. Now, Game of Thrones is set in a very low fantasy setting, and in case you're not familiar with that, all that means is there's just not all these just miracles and divine magics, or, it's just not that commonplace in the setting. So when something happens like raising someone from the dead, it's really special. And that's something that Thoros was used quite often in. Now, he serves the Lord of Light, and he has this kind of faith struggle, and I really like that Thoros tends to kind of buck some of the common trends that go with, the idea of a holy man. He drinks too much. He tends to admittedly whore around a little bit. So I really like that you can play a cleric that isn't this goody two-shoes or has all of his ducks in a row. And I got a few quotes that I just want to read because I really think it explains who Thoros is, and I think it really explains the kind of character you could make when making a cleric. He says, "I ask the Lord for his favor, and he responds as he will. There's no story so good a drink won't make it better." And then when he was speaking of his friend Beric, who had been killed, "I knelt beside his cold body and said the old words, not because I believed in them, but he was my friend, and he was dead. And they were the only words I knew. And for the first time in my life, the Lord replied. Beric's eyes opened, and I knew the truth. Our God is the one true God, and all men must serve him." Man, talk about just a character that's just ripe with storytelling potential. Now, the cleric is most famous for being the healer in the group. Now, all the way through D&D's history, the cleric is the one that you go to if you were poisoned, or you were paralyzed, or something funky was going on. Maybe your arm fell off, I don't know. Or maybe your character died, and it's like, yeah, I need someone to raise him from the dead. The cleric, no matter what domain that you choose as your subclass, you're going to be the healer in the group. They're also, in case you haven't caught on to the theme yet, a divine character. And their channel divinity feature lets them express the faith and the powers that they've been given by their god in very unique and powerful ways. One common thing that all clerics can do, though, is turn and or destroy undead, which makes them very handy when you're going into maybe like a graveyard, or like going up against a necromancer or something like that. Also, they're known for being quite zealous as well, and I like to think that whatever it is that they do, their zeal is often best reflected in their subclass choice. So right off the bat, the cleric gets to choose their divine domain, which is basically their subclass, and it's kind of the flavor and the flair that they use to express their faith and the powers that their god has given them. Now, the player's handbook has 7 of them, so we're just going to very briefly go over them because I don't think we're going to go too in depth right now. You could choose the knowledge domain, which paints your cleric as this scholarly sage that combines natural study and divine blessings so that you're able to do things or know things even if you weren't trained in them. It's kind of like you're able to be given what you need in the moment you need it. You could also choose the life domain, which is the most classic expression of a cleric and is the best pure healing build in the game. You also get heavy armor, so it makes you pretty good on the front line if you need to have a tank or if your fighter goes down. You could choose the light domain, which lets you unleash righteous and fiery judgment on your foes. And clerics that choose this domain get access to a lot of powerful fire spells that you normally can only get if you're a wizard or a sorcerer. You could choose the nature domain, which pretty much lets you combine a lot of druidic abilities and spells into the cleric class. Now, earlier we talked about Thor being a tempest cleric, which lets you use thunder and lightning, and heavy armor, which makes it a great way to combine frontline fighting and destructive magic. You could also take the trickery domain, which is themed by mischief, illusions, and misdirection, which makes this domain perfect for anyone that enjoys one-upping their enemies. And then last but not least, you could take the domain of war, which is the best pure warrior option available for the cleric. You can fight with martial weapons, heavy armor, and you augment these abilities with divine blessings. The cleric, I think you could make a very strong case that pound for pound is the most powerful class in the game. When it comes to building your cleric, make sure your highest ability score is your wisdom, because that's where all of their magic is based off of. If you plan on being on the front line by taking the Tempest domain or maybe the War domain, having a high strength score is going to help you out because that's where your melee attacks are going to be based off. And as always, having a high constitution is always a good idea because it's going to help you succeed on your concentration checks and have a lot of hit points. And if you're not sure what race to play, I'd like to recommend the Hill Dwarf. So that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions about playing a cleric, maybe you'd like to tell us about a cleric you played in the past, or an idea for a future cleric, maybe you even just want to say hello. I don't know. Either way, go ahead and head down to the comment section down below, and please feel free to do that. Also, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that bell so you're notified when we make a video. We also have a Twitch channel located at twitch.tv/JNJtabletop, where we air all of our live gameplay first, and it's a great way to get to know everybody in the community. We're going to have links to all of our social media accounts, and as well as any other helpful resources that we can think of in the description below. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a good day, and remember, even if you doubt, keep the faith. Take care, everybody.